Today we're talking about theme and symbol as writing tools, and we're really looking at how to add depth and resonance in your stories using theme, symbol, and metaphor. What's your book is one of those questions that brings sweat to the brow of new writers who feel as if they're in an oral exam for lit class and they forgot to do the reading. At writers' conferences and in creative writing classes, students are often taught the concept of the elevator pitch, which is a 30-second pitch that encapsulates a book's plot. So when writers hear this question, the impulse is to tell the listeners the plot line because that's what we think our story is about. Theme, however, is really what the story is about, but in those same conferences and classes where we spend endless time teaching plot development, using methods like the hero's journey, save the cat, or some other form of plotting, we seldom discuss theme development. Conversely, in literature class, we discuss theme and symbolism, metaphor and simile, yet we seldom bridge those two sides of reading and writing. So in short, we expect books to have a theme as readers, yet we do a pretty bad job of explaining it to writers. In my undergraduate composition class, students will sometimes ask me, when I'm reading their rough draft, what's my thesis? And I always answer, if you don't know, how do you expect me to? Because the thesis is the glue that holds their papers together. If they don't know their thesis, they probably wrote a convoluted and disconnected essay. So theme is similar to the thesis statement in some respects because it's the glue that holds your story together, or at least the one that resonates with readers. So what do you do if you don't know what your theme is? Today we're going to find out, and we're going to do some prompts and activities that kind of help us suss out what our themes are. But first, let's talk about what theme is not. Theme is not the plot of your book. It's not the moral of the story. It's not the log line, the elevator pitch, or the synopsis, or anything directly related to plot. What is theme then? So one of my favorite discussions on theme is from Ron Capps, who wrote the book Writing More. I like it because it's written from a writer's perspective rather than literary criticism. It's also common everyday language, and I think we often need that. So what he says is that theme is the principal idea you, the author, are trying to get across to the reader. It's the real reason you're writing the story in the first place. You have something worth saying about the human experience. The story is the vehicle you use to expose what you want to say about the human condition, the theme. Theme, then, is a universal truth about the human condition, and it's often stated in a word or short phrase such as love conquers all, revenge, coming of age, and you can do a Google search and find some common themes in literature. Oftentimes, writers have common themes or repetitive themes that they write about, particularly in the beginning without conscious thought. So I discovered after the fact a few repetitive themes in my work, even though my book series are very different in plotline and characterization. So I have one series that's a world of the mafia and FBI, and another series that's about military special operations. And these are tremendously different worlds. Yet the theme that ties many of these books together is the idea that family is the people we choose rather than a group that we are born into. All right, so I'm going to give you some examples, and I often start with with movies because most of us read in vastly different genres, but we have greater odds of having seen the same movies. So I'm going to give you a plot line or a one-sentence summary of a movie. Actually, it's first one movie book. And I want you to, as you're listening to this or watching this, figure out what the book is based on the plot. And then we're going to talk about the theme. So in the first one, a boy discovers he's a wizard and moves to a boarding school for wizards where he defeats an evil villain. And obviously, that's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. The theme, however, is coming of age. So while the book plot is about what happens to him his first year at wizarding school, the theme is about coming of age as an 11-year-old who finds out he's a wizard. All right, let's go with another example. In example 2, a beautiful woman falls in love with a farm boy who is thought to have been killed after leaving to seek his fortune which leads her to get engaged to an evil prince before she realizes her true love is alive. And if you haven't guessed that one, it's The Princess Bride. And the theme with that one is the very common and yet much loved love conquers all. All right, one last movie, and then we'll move to a book related or literature. So in example 3, a farm boy joins forces with a princess and a smuggler to overcome the establishment. And yes, that's a very simplistic one-sentence summary for the movie Star Wars, the very first one, which is actually 4. And the theme for this one, or one of many themes, is good overcomes evil. All right, so the next one, I'm going to use examples from the short story The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, because as we look deeper into theme, this particular story has many different themes. And if you haven't read it, it's intertwined in the story of a platoon in Vietnam who endure hardship, injuries, and death. The characters carry guns, gear, photos, and letters. These are tangible things that they carry, which is the overt or external plot line of the things they carry. But the thematic elements are their emotional burdens. O'Brien writes, they carried all the emotional baggage of men who might die. Grief, terror, love, longing, these were intangibles, but the intangibles had their own mass and specific gravity. They had tangible weight. So one of the themes obvious in O'Brien's story is the burdens we all carry. And I think that's why I go back to this story repeatedly as a reader and a teacher. It reveals something of the human condition that resonates with me. In this case, the idea that none of us escape the human condition without burden or regret. Other themes are truth, guilt and shame, friendship, and to get to these universal truths, he often employs symbols and metaphors. All right, so we're going to talk about symbols and metaphor. In literature, we say that a symbol is a person, object, image, word, or event that evokes a range of additional meaning beyond and usually more abstract than its literal significance. Symbols evoke complex ideas without having to resort to painstaking explanations, so that these kinds of explanations would be making a story more like an essay than an experience. And so these symbols stand for something bigger than they are. Common symbols we see, as you can see from the image that I've included on this slide, Albert Einstein is often used to symbolize intelligence or genius. We have the Christian cross as a symbol, the Star of David, a national flag. All of these are overt symbols that we're used to seeing in our regular world. A metaphor compares two dissimilar things, while a simile does the same thing using the words like or as. Metaphors can be subtle and powerful and can transform people, places, objects, and ideas into whatever the writer imagines them to be. In one of my first creative nonfiction pieces, nonfiction was sort of new to me as an adult when I was going through my master's program, and I fell in love with creative nonfiction and the personal essay. And I use fire as a metaphor, particularly the fires, Waldo Canyon and the Black Forest Fire. And I use them as metaphors for all the things that burn or tear apart our lives, like death, divorce, and other acts of destruction. In the story, The Things They Carried, one recurring symbol is a young man whom the narrator has killed while he was in Vietnam. And this recurring symbol adds to the theme of the burdens that we carry. But as a symbol, it symbolizes a physical thing that has become a thematic element. And this symbol, while a symbol in the real world can be an inanimate object. And I would say usually symbols are inanimate objects. So for instance, in the same story, one of the characters carries a letter from Martha that the narrator obsesses over. And it really is symbolic of his past life experiences that distract him from the realities of war. In the same story from this collection, each character carries something that acts as a symbol for that character. There's a quote in the line in the book. It says, As a hedge against bad times, however, Kiowa also carried his grandmother's distrust of the white man, his grandfather's old hunting hatchet. So here, the hatchet is acting as a symbol for the distrust of the white man, and it helps us to further understand the character of Kiowa. And if we see this symbol used repeatedly by Kiowa, we don't have to say this is a symbol of his grandfather or his grandmother's distrust of the white man. We recognize it in future renditions when we see the hatchet. So other characters carry dope, tranquilizers, food, pantyhose, and other things that seem random but work as symbols to develop our understanding of that particular character or idea. All right, so that's all well and good, right? But what's your story's theme and how do you find it? So much like my composition students who can't identify their thesis statement, some writers struggle with themes. So we're going to have some writing prompts to work on today. However, let's look at some ideas on writing and developing theme. Not all writers know their theme going into the story. Writers of memoir, for instance, struggle to find a thematic element to connect to their lived experiences. It's challenging when it's real-life experience. Writers who are plotters, or those who pre-plot or pre-outline their work, can build theme into their plot before they put a word onto the page, but that's not necessarily a requirement of somebody who plots in advance. And the other side of that same coin are pantsers, or we call it those who don't plot ahead of time. We call them pantsers because they write by the seat of their pants. And many times they just want to write the story first, and that's okay. You don't have to know the theme going in. Pantsers can start with other elements of the story, like an interesting hook, an intriguing character, or a real-world event. Then, once a pantser has completed the story, they can discover the theme like a first-time reader. So in other words, you become your first reader and you start to see hints of what that theme might be. And then when you're going through revisions, you want to make this theme more consistent and apparent throughout. This, by the way, is how I write. When a story is running really hot for me, I think plot line first, and as I revise, I uncover the themes and add symbolism and other literary devices to strengthen my theme. So whether you find your theme before you start writing, as some writers do, or after the first draft is complete, neither of which is wholly correct. It's what works for your process. Here are some suggestions for finding your thematic elements, and we are going to be working with these here shortly. So choose a theme that resonates with your reader, such as O'Brien's theme of the burdens we all carry resonated with me. Readers tend to read certain thematic elements over others or have a preference for some. So like Love Conquers All stories might be a preference of some readers, while others want revenge stories. So figure out who is your reader and what resonates with them. You could also choose a theme that resonates with you, the writer. Families of choice is a theme that resonates with me, particularly after my divorce. I often unconsciously include an element of this theme in many of my stories, and other times I might deal with a theme of identity or strong women. Another way to go about it is to choose a universal theme. So what thematic element describes a universal truth or universal experience? For example, coming of age, which is Harry Potter, the inevitability of death, which is a part of the things they carried. Find a universal theme that works for you and start that way. You can also choose multiple themes. For those of us who don't like making choices, this probably works really well. But O'Brien discusses the themes of death, grief, burdens, friendship, and a myriad other themes within his short story. So you don't have to limit yourself to one theme, which we'll see when we start working on the prompts. All right, so we're going to work on some prompts for the rest of today. And so what I want you to do first is make sure that you have a pen or pencil and paper, and we'll talk about theme.